Hello, friends. This is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today we're hopping again across the pod to chat with Matthew Quilliam. Matthew, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not doing too shabby. It's bright and sunny here for once. It has
Yeah.
not been in weeks, so I'm quite happy about that. Would you mind just kicking us off with a tune?
Yeah, of course.
This is a song that I wrote called What Does a Pound Shop Sell? Referring to the English currency, the pound. It's a song that I originally wrote for a musical that I composed, but I've since removed this song from that overall story and made it into its own self-contained narrative. You can watch the music video to this on YouTube, listen to it on Spotify, and you can download the chords for it on my website. I hope you enjoy. Why is it that shop names are so confusing? I've been walking round the town and I have not seen a thing that makes any lick of sense to me at all. I think we ought to introduce some shop naming rules. Stop with all the madness, it brings me lots of sadness. And now I'll tell you why. Well, now you must agree that a bookshop sells books. You all know that a food store sells food for the cooks. A pet shop sells the pets for us to adore. And a car shop sells the cars that we will use evermore. So tell me then, so I know as well. What does a pound shop sell? Pounds? And tell me so my confusion will stop. Do you buy corners at a corner shop? Do you see the point that I am trying to say? This issue drives me so mad day after day. No one buys the butcher at the butcher's store, and no one goes to a chemist shop for chemist galore. No one buys the adults in the adult shop. This confusion has to stop. Well, now you must agree that a bookshop sells books. You all know that a food store sells food for the cooks. A pet shop sells the pets for us to adore. And a car shop sells the cars that we will use evermore. So tell me then, so I know as well. What does a pound shop sell? Pounds? And tell me so my confusion will stop. Do you buy corners at a corner shop? I might write a letter to Parliament to complain that all the stupid shop names are killing my brain. Hello, Prime Minister, I don't mean to bore, but you don't go to the workshop to buy some chores. I think you will agree. I mean this very seriously now. You must agree that a bookshop sells books. You all know that a food store sells food for the cooks. A pet shop sells the pets for us to adore. And a car shop sells the cars that we will use evermore. So tell me then, so I know as well. What does a pound shop sell? Pounds? And tell me so my confusion will stop. Do you buy corners at a corner shop?
Matthew, that was a lovely tune. And you actually have quite a different journey in the instrument than a lot of other musicians who have been here, in that you actually started out playing ukulele, which is very interesting to me and something we don't see as much in the States, I think, as over in the UK. So can you tell us just a little bit about your musical journey and how you've gotten to where you are now?
Yeah, of course. So yes, as you correctly pointed out, my first instrument, both in a chronological sense and also the fact that it's my main instrument, has always been the ukulele. Um, as opposed to people who start on guitar or whatever and go to the ukulele later in life. And it all came about pretty by accident, to be honest. Throughout the first part of my life, I always wanted to be like an actor or something, or a playwright or something like that. I was never really interested in music. But then one day we had some visitors come to the school who would teach you different instruments every month. So one month we'd have drum lessons or percussion lessons, and the next month clarinet, violin, brass, and then we were supposed to have. I think it was the last term was supposed to be the violin, but then, and I don't know how true this is, but the rumours were that the violin teacher, the old the old woman she was, sadly passed away apparently about a week before she was supposed to start with us. And so
I
the
should
school,
not laugh at this. This is not
no, this
fun.
is but I don't know how serious this is, but the rumors were that she passed away just a week before we were due to have lessons, and the school panicked, and they needed something cheap and sort of easy to buy in bulk to sort of just as a replacement, and they didn't have the violins, so they got ukuleles, and we got these cardboard boxes with rubber bands on them to sort of learn the ukulele, and I sort of got on with it so much better than I did with all the other instruments we'd tried. For whatever reason, quite asthmatic, so obviously horns and clarinets weren't really a match for me. So the ukulele was really sort of the instrument that took my interest. And because it was new and it was proving popular with all the other pupils in the school, they thought, hey, let's make this a regular thing. And they introduced uke lessons for the first time for my year, so that people could try out and see if it could become sustainable. Now, sadly, in the UK, a lot of music in schools is not possible anymore due to a lack of funding. But at the time,
Don't worry, that is not just the UK. That is also
Yeah.
very much the US as well, unfortunately.
Sadly, yeah. But at the time, it was such a thriving musical community in our village. So it was really easy to just say you wanted lessons and have some. So yeah, I got these uke lessons, and I sort of really got on with it. And this was the end of primary school, and then I went into secondary school where there wasn't so much musical activity. As we were saying, the funding was diminishing and all that kind of thing. And so I was kind of sort of self-taught in a way. Sort of, I wanted to continue this tradition, and I borrowed my auntie's ukulele, just because that was the only one that I had access to. And I was just sitting there learning some just 4-chord songs or whatever. And then one day, my dad came in and said, "Yeah, you should play that When I'm Cleaning Windows song." And he's like, I said, "What is that? I've never heard of it." "Oh, it's some song from the old 30s. I don't want to listen to this old-fashioned rubbish. I want to play pop music." And then it took a few weeks for him to persuade me to just listen to it. So I went on YouTube and I saw the video of him in the film where he sings this song, and I was hooked. And then I watched it again, and then I found another song, and I basically spent about a year just on YouTube watching all of his songs and listening to different people cover his music. And I was so just impressed by the fact that there was somebody who was taking the ukulele in its own direction, rather than sort of what I've been doing previously, which was playing pop songs, which were never designed to be played on a uke.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I
uke.
love about Formby as well, is you look at his repertoire and how he treated the instruments. And you go, well, he's treating it as an individual instrument and doing things that are indicative of that instrument. That's
Yeah.
really my favorite thing about Formby's playing. I wish I had discovered him at a younger age, much as you did. But being in the US, he never really had prominence whatsoever. It wasn't until I took up uke that it was even thought of, that maybe we would hear that.
But so I was maybe 11 or 12 when this was all happening. And so, really young. And then I started teaching myself the Formby technique, and it took me several years to get into it. And then I sort of perhaps got too into it that all I would do is play Formby. And then my parents, who had previously encouraged me to learn Formby, were now so sick of it.
There you go. Please, they were like, stop that split stroke. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Anything else, please. And so they got me lessons. And again, these lessons were kind of by people who'd were good on uke, don't get me wrong, but had come from it from a guitarist perspective. So again, all the repertoire was very much sort of covers of Beatles songs and all that kind of thing. But then I sort of was like, I want something uke specific, a bit like Formby, but in the modern day. And that's when I started discovering the current uke scene and sort of throwing myself down that rabbit hole. And have since been learning classical pieces sort of that have been arranged for the uke by people, and other sort of songs and things, and which has led me to where I am today. Now I'm 20, which is actually focusing on my own original music for the uke in an attempt to push it further and give it its own identity.
Yeah, and Matthew is actually joining us from his residence at university, where he is studying music currently and getting his degree. Did you ever think that an old woman violinist dying would make you get to university?
No.
This seems to be the driving force behind it, is actually this singular event of, unfortunately, someone passing away and being forced to play ukulele. So
Yeah.
what is it exactly that you are studying at university? Because we were chatting about this program earlier before we hit record. It's something that we actually don't have in the States, and it intrigues me very much. So especially for my US viewers, you might find this very interesting as to what specifically you are studying at university.
Sure. Well, this is a course that is not offered very much across the country. There are only a few courses like it where they actually merge the performance side of music with the educational side. So the course is called Instrumental Teaching. So we'll do half of the modules is on looking at performance technique, especially being quite an advanced player now. I need sort of guidance beyond learning to play chords and sort of thinking about, how can we phrase this? What could we do instead to bring some variety? And then, of course, we'll look at theory as well, and quite advanced theory and things like that, studying pieces, dissecting them. But then we'll also spend the other half of the modules learning how to go from the quite advanced sort of musical ideas and sort of bringing it back down to the basics to teach to young children and new beginners of any age. For example, we may be talking about why a certain chord progression works the way it does, which is useful to know, especially if you're a composer, obviously. But then you're going to be using musical language that a child who's maybe 4 or 5 won't have a clue what you're talking about. And so a lot of it's like thinking about the psychology of children and how they work and how they learn, to then specifically put musical context into a language that they'll understand, which then provides you with a good sort of way to teach them music.
Absolutely, and that is one of the largest challenges for any teacher, is how do you translate that knowledge in an effective and efficient way that is absorbable by someone who doesn't have the knowledge that you do. And it's a tough obstacle to cross. And of course, every person, every age group, every individual has their own obstacles in there as well. And you need to also be able to frame your teaching to be able to do that. So I'm really glad that you're being able to learn more about that in your university program. And I'm actually curious, because we don't, I can think of 2 schools in the US where you can get a degree in ukulele whatsoever. The rest are, as most of the viewers here know, I majored in upright bass in university. I didn't even play ukulele back then, but had I wanted to major in ukulele, it was not something that would have been available to me. So what kind of repertoire do you go through in your ukulele courses at university? I'm curious personally as to what sort of rep you're doing over there.
Yeah, well, it's still, I think, a relatively new thing, the ukulele in the UK, in terms of actually taking it seriously, whatever seriously means.
Sure.
And there are some universities that are still very much in an old-fashioned focus. So, for example, I did actually get the opportunity to go to an open day at Cambridge University, and they were very much, you either play violin or the piano, or you don't come here. At least
right.
if
They're
you
like
wanted,
our Curtis or Juilliard.
yeah, at least if you wanted sort of scholarly support or bursaries or anything like that, obviously they would allow flutes and things, but definitely not even guitars or saxophones.
Well, I don't blame them.
Like
no
that.
one wants to hear a saxophone. Let's be honest about that. Terrible.
Yeah.
Except for Kenny. God.
So and then, but there are some other sort of, I wouldn't call them lower tier, although of course apart from Cambridge and maybe Oxford, you don't really have many that sort of meet the same sort of level as prestigious as those. But there
Right.
are still some universities that are perfectly equally valid, but they're a bit more niche and a bit sort of off the grid, if you like. And the university I go to is a bit like that, in the sense that they'll accept anyone as long as you're good. Obviously, you still have to pass an audition, but they've
I
got
would hope so. Yeah, you have to pass that
yeah.
audition, right?
Yeah, but some universities will accept gamelan players or players of the mandolin. There's a mandolinist here as well, and so there's much more opportunity to be niche. And obviously, being a ukulele player first and foremost, I certainly fit into that category. And so obviously it's still quite a new thing, so they still actually had to get a uke specialist in specially for me, as opposed to if you played a bass or something where there's already teachers there. But we go through all the sort of repertoire that I've been interested in, so sort of taking form B to as high as it can go to meet university level, as well as sort of looking at John King classical music. There's a Paul Mansell book behind me. I'm playing some
Oh, no, you have one
music
of
of
Paul's
Joan.
books in the curriculum there? That's great.
Well, it's not in the curriculum. You can play whatever you like, but I'm
Okay. I actually love
introducing
to
that
hear that you
myself.
are studying Formby at a university level. I
Yeah,
just
well,
something that
not
I yell
studying,
about, that
but
it's
just
an important style for uke players to learn,
yeah,
even if you don't care about his music
yeah,
at all. It doesn't matter whether you like the tunes. The right
yeah.
hand techniques are beneficial no matter what you do, and
Mm.
force you outside of your comfort zone. So I love hearing that. And I think there's a lot
Yeah,
of
well,
more possibilities there
it's not so
compositionally as
much
well.
it's not so much the study of, but I sort of take his techniques and maybe combine it into a Roy Smet kind of arrangement. So we
Sure.
look at the old stuff, then yeah, the modern stuff, which is Paul Mansell and Sam Muir, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
A mixture of even Colin Tribe, some of his arrangements of classical music, and then some more contemporary stuff by Sam Muir, Elizabeth Pfeiffer, Joan Galvez. I just try and get a big range of things, really. But as long as you can show different various techniques, both in the right hand and the left, then you get an overall sense of what the uke can do. And a lot of lecturers are quite surprised when because previously they might have thought the ukulele can only play 4 chords, and I
Yeah.
go in there and play anything else. And they're still quite surprised. So it's a learning experience for both me and the lecturers, who are obviously very open-minded.
Yeah, which is a beautiful thing. And are you the first person at your specific university that is majoring in ukulele?
Yes, absolutely. And probably one of the first in the country to have it as their first study.
Mm,
We probably know Andy Eastwood did
yeah.
his recital on the ukulele,
Yep.
but he is especially, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think he also was playing violin and piano and stuff at the time as well,
Oh, certainly.
to a
Yeah.
similar degree. Whereas I'm literally, ukulele is pretty much all I have. I play a few other instruments fairly well, like the guitar, and I play bass, but ukulele is where it's at for me. So again, a different approach to people who've gone before.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing. As you had mentioned earlier, just kind of legitimizing the instrument as a valid instrument in the lexicon of music, which of course it is. It's a tool that we play music through. They're all valid. As yeah, I mean mandolin as well. Like, and especially thinking about in UK culture, that the history of mandolin is so strong in there, especially in in the UK and also in Ireland as well with traditional music. Like, why would we not study that at a higher level? But
Yeah,
it's a newer thing, and likewise in the States we have a couple places that you can now major in mandolin or even bluegrass studies, which is an indicative American form of music. But it's good to see some of these smaller instruments that never really got their due earlier on in an academic setting now starting to get that. And and a little bit, I hate to put it this way, but the snobbery of the classical music melting away a bit out of academia in the music field. And I think that's something that's very necessary, because there's so much great contemporary music out there and so many great contemporary writers
yeah,
across all instruments, and they just simply can't be ignored.
yeah,
So I'm glad to see the university system sort of catching up with that. Matthew, would you mind playing us another tune?
yeah. Of course, absolutely.
This is a little waltz that I wrote for the ukulele. It doesn't yet have a name, but I hope you enjoy it all the same.
Matthew, while you're at university, you've actually been doing some research study as well into ukulele, and I would absolutely love to talk about that because while there's been, I actually would say minimal academic research into the history of uke as an overarching theme, you're really diving down something completely new, which is studying more of the contemporary progression of the ukulele in society. And can you just talk a little bit about that and tell people what you're looking into and what your goals are with this research?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's fair to say that there's been at least quite a good attempt at researching the history on the ukulele of previous waves, as it were. In the UK, we've certainly seen one, two, maybe three waves of the uke. And there are great books that detail, especially the 20s to the 40s kind of era of the ukulele, focusing on the big names like Ukulele Ike and George Formby, as we've been talking about. And then obviously now we're in a resurgence of the ukulele's popularity. And I am starting to find interest in plotting the history of our current wave and sort of determining who the big influential players are in the history and changing the way people think and approach the uke. And so that's what this research is really all about. It's nothing to do with the university, it's purely my own interests and research. But of course, I like to share it with the world. But of course, it's not being at uni, so there's no deadline, so I can't say when it's going to come out or anything. But I will be posting regular updates about it on my Facebook and website and things like that. But it's kind of, the theory of it is that our current wave of ukulele popularity, especially in the UK, begins in the mid 80s when the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain form, and it peaks. At least the first wave peaks with Jake Shimabukuru's
While
sort of
my guitar
viral
gently weeps,
video.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
So
like the kickoff of our wave over here, certainly.
right, yeah.
That,
So our current wave is split into three shorter segments, and this first mini segment starts with the orchestra and peaks with Shimabukuro, where it's kind of defined by people thinking outside the box and saying, "Oh, I've got a ukulele, let's do what no one else has done before." Now, obviously, Shimabukuro is from Hawaiian culture, but his influence on the UK is really the what the research is focusing on. And in the UK, certainly, we hadn't seen anything like what he can do. So then, for him to just come out of nowhere from an English person's perspective, really has a big impact on the next wave, if you like. So we've got the orchestra who are playing really innovative covers and things on the uke, not just the fact that they're covering songs on the uke, but they cover them so well.
it's
And they're
such an
so
incredible
intricate
matter. If anyone's
arrangements.
not familiar with the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain, you absolutely have to check them out. They are
Yeah,
just a joy to
yeah,
watch. But
absolutely.
their arrangements are absolutely incredible when they do
Yeah,
the instruments as
yeah,
well.
exactly. And so they've got so many levels to their musicianship. And as I said, that's what starts the first mini wave, and it peaks with Shimabukuro. The next mini wave, if you like, is kind of what's happening now, or at least it's peaking right now. This is where everyone jumps on the bandwagon, so to speak, and you suddenly have ukulele festivals popping up literally everywhere.
Oh yes.
Schools are full of ukuleles, the shops are too, and it's just become this big explosion where it's really popular. That said, though, there isn't too much in the way of original material in that school. It's mostly people sort of doing familiar repertoire on the uke, either for gimmicky, comical purposes or just because there's a lack of anything else to play. And that's where the third mini wave comes in, which I label the future, which is where we're just starting to see it actually within the last few years, but it's yet to really take off and peak, especially in the mass culture in the UK. So we got composers like Sam Muir, Joan Galvez, and performers like Giovanni Albini and even Andy Eastwood with his string quartet and uke. All these contemporary new ways of thinking about the ukulele and actually giving the uke something of its own. And so that's going to be the future of this current wave, where it will take off and actually give the uke its own identity rather than being an instrument for covering other music, which has been prominent in the first 2/3 of this overall wave. I've said the word wave so many
So
times.
many waves. We're in the ocean. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm actually really happy to see this, what you refer to as the third wave, really, all of these new compositions finally coming out for you. There certainly were just, people adapting the pop tunes to you. It's a great, easy instrument to learn, and is really accessible, and great for children as well, because we all have four fingers. Most of us have four fingers. And so we can hold down four strings, and nylon strings are
Yeah.
rather easy, as we all know. You could be off and to the races with a uke within 15 minutes playing 500 songs if you know three chords, let's be honest. But I'm really glad to see the new repertoire coming out. You mentioned, of course, Sam and Chone, who are two of my favorites. You mentioned Elizabeth Pfeiffer earlier as well, and these are all incredible people really pushing. One of my favorite pieces, actually, I don't recall if Sam wrote it or if it was written for her. She had done a piece that's it's electronic sounds as well as ukulele.
Oh yeah, the live electronics. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it Fur Alina or something like that?
Yeah. And I'm really happy to see things like that cropping up, because again, just legitimization of the instrument itself as a real tool in the music world. And I think we're just going to see that come more and more as we see more virtuosic players come up that are able to handle the harder repertoire, that will be able to see a lot more performance of this. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years you go to watch the symphony and you hear a sonata for ukulele. Anything is possible, and I hope people keep pushing the limits of that. And it's something you're doing yourself. You've also been composing some new work
I have, yes,
for ukulele. And are you working on any new pieces now that will be coming out in the future?
Yeah, I'm doing quite a lot actually. Just to quickly go back to the point about the research, though, the point of mapping the history is purely a historical thing. It's not a sort of improvement and evolution through time.
Sure.
Each school is equally valid in their own ways of thinking. But my composition definitely fits into the third school, which is finding new ways to promote the uke. I kind of started writing ensemble pieces just before the lockdown and the virus hit. And so then I wasn't able to really realize those compositions last year because I wasn't able to meet anyone, obviously. So then I've been thinking about solo a bit as well. So at the moment, my compositional palette is very mixed between solo, uke, and ensemble. My main focus has been a sonata for ukulele and piano, and that's come along really well. It's got 3 movements, and it's about 17 minutes, and it goes through quite some different places. And then I've got another one that I'm working on, which is a bit more experimental, very mathematical. So you're taking a motif and then developing it mathematically, and so putting it out of sync with the piano, sort of a bit like Steve Reich and his clapping music kind of thing.
Okay.
Whereas the other sonata is much more melodical and sort of neoclassical in a way, using melody and stuff, but it's obviously in the classical era, they didn't have ukuleles and they wouldn't have perhaps used some of the more modern harmonies that we like to see. Yeah. And then on the solo side, I've got a few projects coming up. I'm trying to actually do a few bits on the banjolele as well, actually, and provide another side to it than Formby, sort of doing more experimental things on it. And I've got this idea for a piece. I can hear it in my head, and I'm yet to work out how to score it. But it's called "It's Coming for You," and I just want this sort of really dramatic, big sound from the uke, and I'm trying to see how far I can push the uke and its 4 strings to sort of see how scary it can get. And that's something I haven't seen too much of. Not necessarily
very scary. Let's be honest.
In the wrong hands.
Terrifying instrument.
You just get it out and people immediately back off. But the overall aim is to provide something new and interesting and different for the uke.
Good. And that's what we always need more of is, I do a lot of arranging myself as well as writing original pieces, but we need more of that, as we had mentioned earlier, just the pieces written for the actual instrument, not adaptions. And we're seeing so much more of that now. And I'm glad that you're participating in that. I look forward to hearing your new pieces.
Yeah, they're going to, I'm hopefully going to be publishing the scores as well as the recordings.
Good.
I'm hoping to record at least the sonatas in well, the original plan was March, but it's now looking like April, May, June kind of
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
I don't think anything's
but
happening until summer at this point.
yeah, maybe even later. But I will be releasing both the scores as well as the recordings, because not only do I just enjoy composing, but I'd really like to put that music out there so that other people can play it. I
Sure,
think that's the main thing.
it's always incredible just to hear other people approach your own piece
Yeah,
and see how they interpret what you have written on the page, and
yeah.
whether you did it, whether you wrote it right.
Yeah, and even just not for my own sake of, oh, that's nice that someone's playing my piece, but it's definitely not just with this composition, this new compositional wave that I was talking about earlier. The composition is only half of the story. The other half is getting it into the public's hands. And that is the only way that this wave will succeed, is if people start to approach this music in great numbers. And people have got to actually have interest in playing this new music. And so people have got to really focus on getting it published and scores and things. And a lot of people are able to do that through Patreon. I know Galvez is doing a lot of Patreon work.
Yeah.
And he's also opened a new bookshop, he calls it, where you can buy sheet music. And so we've definitely got to do a lot more publishing and educating to make sure people can read music. Because there's a lot of players who can't read notation, which I personally think is a little bit of a hindrance if we're going to get these new compositions out. But so yeah, there's a lot of layers to it other than just writing the pieces themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's the one obstacle of a lot of uke players not reading music, which I feel we're getting over. I see some of the larger uke channels on YouTube doing some basic music reading, because it's when I talk to my students about it, and I write everything with tab notation as well as basic chord frames atop, so that we have 3 different ways to interpret the music, and obviously they're all valid as well. I mean, tabs have a very important place in the world of fretted string instruments. I think many of us would be lost with just notation, because it doesn't. Western notation falls a little bit short on scoring for fretted string instruments at times. But the way I always address it to my students is, no, you don't have to read, but if you, or be able to read music at all, but if you want to effectively communicate your musical ideas to another person, it's amazing. We have this system set up to do it, and it's not terribly hard to learn if you take a little bit of time. And I just find it as, just learning a rudimentary new language. It's a heck of a lot easier than learning Spanish, to learn how to read music. So I'm glad to see that. I think there's getting to be more interest in that out there, which will hopefully allow more of these pieces to be performed. Matthew, would you mind just giving us one more song?
Yeah, of course.
This is Matt Stead's arrangement of a Hawaiian traditional folk song called Ka Makini Ka Aliha Aloha, or something like that anyway.
Matthew, thanks you so much for taking some time out of your day and joining me and chatting about music. For everyone watching, I'm going to link below to Matthew's website, his Patreon, his YouTube. His YouTube might be especially interesting to some people that follow me. He delves a lot more into the I want to say the nerdy side of music theory, where I stay functional the vast majority of the time. So if you've ever wanted to approach, playing negative harmony on uke, Matthew's the guy to talk to. I'm only going to give you a minor four chord from time to time. So thank you so much for joining us. I greatly appreciate it, Matthew. And if you wouldn't mind, would you just play us a little tune to get us out of here?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and be here. And I wish all of your viewers a very safe rest of their day. I'm going to just noodle around for a bit, see what comes out. I never really know what's going to happen until it happens. So, yes, well, thank you very much.